Hi, my name is Anadil Hossain. I'm joining you from the UN Refugee Agency in Geneva, and I'm joined today by Jonas Poher Rasmussen, who is the director of the award-winning film Flee, which has already won a tremendous number of awards, but is also nominated for a record 3 Oscars in the coming week. And first of all, congratulations for this tour de force of a film. It's such a beautiful and remarkable tale of an Afghan man who is your friend, your childhood friend, Amin, who recounts his harrowing journey fleeing Afghanistan as a child. And you know, it's such an incredible film that is so richly layered. It's a confessional, it's a testimony. It really speaks to the generational trauma of those who are forced to flee, especially young children, unaccompanied minors in his case. It's a genre-bending film because you've mixed this incredible sort of audiovisual mediums and used it to really tell an authentic story in a very different way. It's a documentary which also uses very dramatic narrative form for storytelling. But for me, what's most beautiful is that it's a journey of trust and honor between two friends. So there's a lot to unpack there. So why don't you start with your journey with Amin and how this story began for you both?
Of course, and thanks for having me, Anadil, and doing this. I met Amin when I was 15. I grew up in this very small rural village in Denmark with like 500 people in it. And then, you know, one day out of the blue, Amin arrived all by himself from Afghanistan and stayed in foster care with a family just around the corner from where I lived. I was immediately drawn to him. You know, one thing was we didn't have a lot of refugees in the area. So, and you know, we didn't have a lot of kids my own age in the village. And also he was very fashionable. Like he was dressed, he cared for fashion, and people in the area really didn't do that. So I just thought to myself, man, that guy looks cool, and I really want to get to know him. And you know, soon we started meeting up at the bus stop every morning going to high school, and we just slowly became very good friends. And I, of course, was curious about how and why he had come, but he didn't want to talk about it. And I, of course, respected that. You know, being a 15-year-old boy, you just kind of, okay, then let's just hang out instead. And we just kind of moved on with our friendship. But this story, you know, kind of became this kind of black box, you know, in our friendship, and within him, this thing that we couldn't really address or talk about. And that's until 9 years ago, where he decided to finally open up and share the story with me, and he allowed me to record the whole thing. So that's what you see in the film. You hear his real voice sharing his testimony of growing up in Afghanistan, and how, you know, his family got torn apart when the country kind of fell apart as well, and how he had to flee and spend 5 years fleeing before he arrived to my hometown. And we then animated the whole thing, the whole story.
You know, you finished this film over a year ago, and it premiered at Sundance, and then, of course, 6 months later, Afghanistan sort of fell at this summer. And as you were watching the crisis in Afghanistan unfold with Amin, did it make you sort of reevaluate your own film and experience and understanding of refugee and forced displacement in a new light? You know, watching another generation 30 years on, you know, I mean, this happened to Amin about 30 years ago, I think, is from what I've read. And so 30 years on, you know, Afghanistan is creating another generation who are going to face similar trauma, and just, you know, through displacement and identity and all those things that come with this kind of conflict and trauma. So how was that for both of you? And then again, 6 months later, we're here where we are today with the Ukraine crisis, and the whole world is sort of watching this unfold in real time, where they're actually seeing people flee in millions. How has that sort of affected not only your reception of your own film, but also audience reception from, say, a year ago to now?
No, but of course, you know, it's become sadly relevant, and it was just heartbreaking this summer to see, you know, August 15th, how you know, the images we saw out of Kabul just resembled it was almost identical images from what, you know, we had done in the film 30 years prior, and it was just surreal to see those same images on the news all of a sudden. And you know, I'm in touch with Amin all the time, and he was really, really affected by it. He still had relatives in Kabul at the time. And you know, just for him to be reminded about his own journey again, and as you say, a new generation of Afghans is going to be pushed out of the country and be in the same kind of limbo he was in maybe for years. So it's just heartbreaking to see, and it's sadly relevant. It also, of course, makes it even more meaningful for me to get this film out, because we need these kind of stories. We need Amin's story to show, to give some nuance, because often refugees are just described by just being refugees, and because his story took place 30 years ago, we can see all the other aspects to him and see that he's a human being like the rest of us, and who has hopes and dreams, and who's a brilliant academic who has a husband who loves cats, who all these things, that we all have, all these things that makes us who we are. And to not by being just defined by being refugee is super important, because I think when we call it a refugee crisis, we kind of distance ourselves from what it really is. It's a humanitarian crisis, and it should be treated as such.
I think you said it all. I mean, you should come and be our spokesperson. It really, really, no, you touched on so many things that, we always try and humanize this monolithic, idea of refugees. It's a group of people, and it happens to them, and somehow they're responsible for their fate. But the whole makes, the individuals make up a whole, but it is a humanitarian crisis. It's not just a refugee crisis, and we all should be looking at this as fellow human beings. And we have 82 million plus, now with 3 million in Ukraine, and this number is unfortunately rising and not decreasing. But what do you hope that people will ultimately take home from this, I guess, journey with you both, as I see it? Because it feels like you really, I felt like I was going on a journey with you and your best friend Amin and his family, and I think that it's you've done such an incredible job using animation to really bring out, I guess, what would have been difficult to do if you just did a sort of more traditional documentary. Do you feel you were able to go to places that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise because you used animation as a tool?
No, but definitely, I think, with the animation, we could really, revitalize, Amin's childhood and where he came from, Afghanistan in the 80s and also Moscow in the 90s, and really kind of show these things and place him there. It's not someone in a costume who acts like being Amin. When we draw Amin, it's still him, and you hear his real voice underneath. So I think definitely there was a way to kind of really bring the past back to life, but also because it's really a story about memory and trauma. We could use the animation as a tool to be a lot more expressive about these things. When it's about emotions, when it's about trauma, it's about fear, it's about sadness, it's about anger. These things, these emotions, then we could really use the animation to push that and kind of make people understand how it feels like to be in these situations where kind of, reality falls apart, and things stops making sense. So I think we could really use animation as a tool to make the story more clear. And to me, the story is really a story about connectivity, like how connected we all are, and the fact that people can relate to the story and see, oh, but he listened to the same music as I did when I was a kid, and oh, but he had a crush on Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I also saw his films, or just that you're able to share a laugh with him, and when you're able to share a laugh with someone, that creates a connection. And when you have a connection, then that generates empathy. So I think it's really, the story is a lot about listening and sharing and connectivity, and how we're all connected across borders and cultural differences, that we're all connected.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on, because you really have, I think, connected so many themes, ideas, milieus, and ultimately, as you say, connected us to what a lot of people are going through right now, and that we find very difficult to create that empathy for these kinds of stories. And as a filmmaker myself, I always looking for ways that we can use our platform, and in this instance, I say courage and creativity, the courage for Amin to share his story, for trusting you, and you having the creative sort of space to do justice to it. And really, thank you so much for sharing these stories. Thank you for bringing us this story in the way that you have, and good luck with the Oscars, and good luck with the film. And I really hope that more and more people get to see it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this.